this comes back to the thing about freeing up resources to allow body to do background work that it doesn't ordinarily get to do, right? So in the tank, we can do things like neurotransmitter production, endorphin production, cellular regeneration. Like that's one of the primary uses of the tank, is for a lot of athletes who are using it for recovery after workouts and competitions and things like that. So there's the physical recovery benefits. There's also the chemical recovery, right? So we do extra digestion, our blood pressure lowers, again, back to neurotransmitter production, endorphin production, things like that. So basically, it's the body's opportunity to balance itself. It's not going to overproduce neurotransmitters. It's going to bring neurotransmitter levels up to an optimal rate.
Okay, right.
What the body wants and needs, what it determines it needs.
Right. So if there's any deficiencies, this is an opportunity for the body to reset back to optimal levels.
Right, right. Throughout the all of your body chemistry and all of your physiological functions.
Has COVID affected float tanks?
It did for a little while. Yeah. For the first few months, people stopped floating. And, well, we closed down, right? Most float centers were closed for the first several months. As it turns out, the recommendations that were being given to the floating industry by the CDC and by municipal health regulators were less than what we had normally been doing anyway. The flotation industry has self-governed for so many years. Like, our standards are so high for hygiene in a float center, like how we're keeping the solution clean, how keeping the surfaces clean. We've been operating at this high standard for decades now. And of course, floating is the ultimate social distancing, right? You're in there by yourself. You're not with other people. So the main considerations that we had to deal with were surfaces in the showers, the handles in and out of the tank, whether or not any of the virus was remaining airborne or on the surface of the interior surfaces of the float tank. So we just started doing things like fogging the inside of the tank with hydrogen peroxide. Works really, really well. And some natural antivirals like rosemary oil we found to be really effective. And other than that, we're just being really cautious with people coming in. We're taking people's temperatures. It's getting busy now. Like, we're now as busy as ever. For whatever reason, are having incredible breakthroughs right now. I think the baseline anxiety level in this country has gone up in the last several years. And people are really finding the tank to be an effective way to combat that anxiety and bring that base level of anxiety down. We're hearing more incredible stories coming from floaters right now than we've ever heard in the whole time we've been operating.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Interesting. And so if someone wanted to find a float tank, first of all, I mean, are there dangers to going to a float tank spa that maybe is not following guidance as closely as others? And how do you know the difference between someone who is really following guidance and someone who isn't? Although I would imagine these days with COVID, basically everyone has to, otherwise they're going to be shut down, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, I would read online reviews of your local float center just to see what people are saying about it. For the most part, people who are coming to float, they will notice whether or not a float center is clean. For the vast majority of commercial float centers in the U.S., cleanliness is priority number one. Right? You are asking people to get naked in your business. So people have to be very, very comfortable with the level of cleanliness in your place. And most float centers take that very, very seriously. The floating industry has an association, the Float Tank Association, that puts out guidelines, that are updated regularly about best practices and in float centers. And most float centers adhere to that religion. So I think for the most part, if a float center is getting good reviews, it's going to be good. Realizing now that like literally only one or two things that can live in float tank water, it's very unfriendly to life in terms of bacteria, algae, uh, pollutants that might into the flotation tank. In our flotation tanks, there's 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt in 300 gallons of water. So it's very, very unlikely that anything's going to actually live in that water.
Right. And for those of the people out in podcast land that have never experienced a spa like that, you take a shower before you get in the water anyways. So,
Right. Yeah, we want everybody as clean as possible before they get in the tank, and you float naked. So you're not bringing in bacteria or soap from a bathing suit, right? Like that. Introducing a bathing suit into the water is the worst thing that you can do.
interesting. Between users, is it fresh water?
No, but it's filtered. Most flotation tanks are filtered using a process of hydrogen peroxide and UV light, as well as a paper medium filter. And the CDC requires that we turn over the entire contents of the tank 3.5 times between each floater. Most commercial float centers can almost double that. So in the amount of time that it takes us to clean up the room after you finish using it before the next person comes in, we do a full clean, top to bottom, wipe every surface, mop all the floors, clean all the walls, like everything gets clean. And that takes usually about a half an hour to do that between floaters, between sessions. And during that half hour, the pump will be running at full speed the entire time. So like in our situation at Zero Gravity in Austin, we're getting about 5.5 to 6 full volumetric turnovers in that half hour.